Welcome to Little Feet Community Podcast, where the wonders of childhood take center stage. I'm Patty O'Connor, a retired preschool director and your host. In each episode, we will chat with professionals, parents, and community members to get to the heart of what it really takes to help those early years feel magical for both you and your child. Today's episode is a little different in that rather than discussing a topic for a wide audience, we will be focusing on advice for one group of parents and caregivers, with some additional advice for educators and community members who strive to support these families. There are approximately 11 million undocumented people living in the United States of America today. Of those, 8.3 million work and contribute to our American economy. Our economy has come to depend upon these families, our farms, our factories, our households. Yet modern times have brought forth a movement that is inhumanely treating these families, leading to separation and emotionally traumatizing events. In this episode, we seek to speak to undocumented parents and their loved ones, offering advice for how to help their families navigate the trauma and long-term stress that comes with the fear of separation and deportation. The advice offered will be for children of all ages, not just young children. To help us with this topic today, we have some very special guests. We will be speaking with licensed professional counselor Yesenia Arias. Yesenia has worked with families for more than 10 years, helping them find ways of speaking to their children about risks that exist, and helping parents know how to support their children in the face of bullying. And in an act of great kindness, we'll be hearing from Ana Victoria Morales, who will share her experience with immigration detention and offer insight into how pre-planning helped her family navigate the incident. Welcome, Yesenia and Ana.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Patty, for having me. Thank you, Yesenia. It's nice to be on this beautiful sunny afternoon. I want to start by saying I think we're living in very weird and odd times. And I feel very privileged that I've been one of the lucky few to get so many opportunities throughout my career and my life here, as well as support from community members, church friends, families, etc. And as I think through, I will start off by saying I started organizing and started my career organizing through the student immigrant movement many, many years ago when all of the student immigrants were high school age and getting ready to apply to college. And there was this huge surgence of young people that realized that they were undocumented, that really needed support from the federal government to make sure that they not only stayed lawfully in this country, but that they had an access to education. And I got involved extremely young. I was about 14, 15 years old. And through that process, learned that my family was undocumented, that I was undocumented. And truthfully, for us, people often say, we want you in this country, but we want you here legally. And with our story, it's very unique because my parents, on both sides, even though they were separated, they did all of the things that they needed to do in order to be here legally. And the error actually occurred in our own checks and balances within this country, with them being able to not communicate with my mom and let her know of a court date. And so I share that because I got really lucky. I sat next to one of the lawyers at my church, and I didn't know she was a lawyer. And she started talking to me. She said, "How are you going to go to college?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I think I'm just going to go to college. I'm going to apply and I'll end up where I want to end up and study political science. And these are all the plans I have." And she's like, "Oh, well, do you have documents?" Oh, wow, that's a great question. And the fact that she asked me that question was I like to say sometimes maybe divine intervention, but it definitely opened up opportunities for me because she was able to figure out that I was, in fact, undocumented, that I had an immigration case that was pending, that the law office that was working on it had not moved it along, and that we had missed not one but 2 immigration visits. And because of that, my family was on deportation proceedings.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were able to get a visa, do all of the things to be able to get myself to apply for a green card. So then I essentially went through a process where I became self-naturalized. And because I mentioned that I was working with the student immigrant movement very early on, I had worked for people like Senator Ted Kennedy at the time, who was still alive, Senator John Kerry, fast forward to like interning for Senator Warren and then becoming a part of her staff. And a ton of these folks that had become a part of my network were advocating for me and for my success. And so I was able to naturalize without having to return to my country, which is Dominican Republic. And a lot of people do not get that access or that pathway or avenue to citizenship in the way that I did. But it meant that my mom's case was still pending and that she was still in deportation proceedings. So I was able to go to college on a green card. I had a work permit and was able to get a green card and was there. And I can recall working on my finals. I think I think it was actually junior year, maybe one of my toughest classes, analyzing politics. And I got a phone call, and my sister calls me. She goes, "ICE is here."
Anna, how old was your sister when you got the call about ICE?
She was 8 years old. And I'm like, okay. So to give you context, we had plans for things like this to happen, right? Like we had access to a credit card. We knew who we were going to call. And we had community members that we knew would give us the support that we needed. So I told her, call the lawyer, stay with mom, make sure both my grandparents were alive. So my grandfather and my grandmother were at the house. Make sure that they don't take our grandparents, and I'll get the next flight out of Ohio. So as you can imagine, I'm like in this liberal art institution. I went to school at Granville, Denison University, through the Posse Scholar. I messaged all of my professors. My mom got picked up by ICE. I need to go to Boston. I need to go back to Lawrence. And if you guys could please help me figure out how I can finish my finals remotely, I would appreciate that. And this was pre-COVID. So of course we were still doing things in the internet. Access to technology was a thing, but professors were still expecting you to be on site to take your finals. And to my professors' credit and the support I got from that institution, I was able to do my finals even though I was away. But then you really think about the resilience of our communities, right? Like, not to say, let me get a pass or let me not show up or I can't do this. It was like, I'm getting on a plane, my mom's getting detained. I still want to be able to pass my finals because all of my grants and my scholarship rely on me making sure I get the right GPA to stay on campus. And so I remember getting home. When I got there, my immigration lawyer was at my house and she's like, mom is in a detention facility. I'm like, what do we do? And for me, I think it was one of the first times that I got really scared. I think up until this point, we always had a plan, but this was the first time where I was, wait, I really don't know what's going to happen. Can we communicate with her? Where is she going to end up? Will we get to see her, or this the next time we see her is like back in the Dominican Republic? And now that we're older, I think my sister and I are in a much better place where, like, if something like this were to happen, I think it's more feasible for us to be able to travel back and forth to the Dominican Republic and here. But at the time, I was in the midst of getting my undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I think that the 48 hours of that uncertainty kind of feel like a blur now, because as I think through my time then, I think we went to like the Burlington reporting site. They have an ICE facility in Burlington. And I think our lawyer was able to get mom like where she was. Luckily, they didn't send her out of state. And one of the things that my mom kept saying was that when the ICE detainers got to her, they kept saying, we can't believe we're taking this woman, not her. Why are we taking her? And then, my mom was sharing that to me, and I'm like, yeah, mom, they're saying that because you were probably in your living room, like reading a book, right? She's like, yeah, she was reading Pride and Prejudice. My grandmother is like making dinner. My grandfather's probably listening to merengue, classical music downstairs, playing dominoes with his friends.
Yeah.
that's like America. Like you're walking
Mhm.
into a American working class home, and what are you expecting? And so I think my mom, when she thinks about the story, she always says that. And I think the reason that she says it is because I'm not the exception, right? Like I was just like reading a book, but there are people that are just feeding their kids or just doing laundry or just coming home from a long day's work and a long day's shift and are getting ready to go into the shower, and their whole
Yeah.
life is uprooted.
Now, Anna and Yesenia, I was hoping that we could just offer, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, but some resources for families in cases of emergency. And Yesenia, we had spoken about when families do the emergency plan, that there are templates that they can
Mhm.
access for that. But in the case of, like, if ICE came, and Anna, for you, when ICE came, the first call was to your lawyer,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
And then beyond that, like, what is the recommendation beyond that? Do you reach out to like Brooklyn Defenders or an organization like that?
I say if the family has access to an immigration lawyer that they're working with, I say do that, and do not speak to anybody else.
Ah,
Because especially now, it's so weird that we're living in these times, but I remember then, like my lawyer being very intentional, like you call me first if anybody asks you anything about your case, if they ask you anything about your mom, if they ask you anything, you don't need to answer. First of
huh.
all, like your sister's not of age, so she doesn't need to answer. And also, they're not there for your grandparents, so make sure that they are not in the space so that they're picked up, because that's
Yeah.
not who they're getting. And they actually can't pick up anybody. I mean, at the time, I don't know what laws are now, but they can't pick up anybody that they don't have a warrant for.
Okay.
Um, and so I think for me that was the biggest thing, and it's like silence is your best friend until you have access to a, a person that knows the law. Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
And sorry, Jasenia, I don't want to cut you off. I had also shared that I had access to a credit card, like my sister and I had, but because I was old enough already to apply for credit. But if
mm,
the kids have access, and then we're talking to minors, so if like the kids have access to cash or a fund where they can have, like they know that it exists. So if it exists with a family friend, or they know where in the house it is, or they are on a bank account, I think that's very important, because oftentimes there are lawyers that will do work pro bono, but if you want somebody to get onto your case immediately, I think just to open up a case, it's between $1,500 to $3,000
oh my
easy.
goodness. Wow.
And I know that sounds insane, but that's really the cost.
Hearing a lot of what like Anna was saying, like I think it's super important to think through a lot of things that even like right now I don't think all of us can think through. So United We Dream is a website that I really would encourage people to check out because it has the template that kind of walks you through thinking a lot of these things we're kind of talking about, like who to go to, what numbers to have memorized and to have easy access to, who the kids should know to like go to if any of this happens. But then it also kind of has know your rights, which I think all of us have the responsibility right now to kind of be well versed in for people we care about in our community and for ourselves, right? And the primary thing is like don't answer any questions that you don't need to answer, or don't open the door if you don't need to open the door, right? Like I think the biggest thing is like if ICE comes to your door, ask for a warrant, right? That's signed by a judge and make sure that that is what they're handing you, because otherwise you don't have to do anything else, right? And so like that's why it's so important to know those things, right? So you feel prepared to respond to these situations. And I think on the other side of it, you feel empowered, right? Like
Yeah.
having that knowledge of like, okay, I don't have to tell them anything. I don't have to answer their question, are you a citizen or not, right? Like unless, X, Y, and Z. So it's important to kind of be aware of that for yourself and for other people.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
and one thing I want to add before memorizing, for families that have children that are like young enough that could memorize numbers, they should know like their names,
Yeah.
a phone number they can call. I, if they know there's, I mean, if anything that they could then that they can have access to, try to have the kids to know. But one activity that I'd like to share is there are these bracelets that became really famous during Taylor Swift's tour, and she was getting all the little girls to do friendship bracelets, and they say different piece on them and stuff like that. I would these beads, if you go to Five Below, they are like $2, $3, and literally make colorful bracelets with your kids' information and put them so that they know, even if they can't remember, they
Yeah.
have their name, their address, at least their last name, and like an adult's phone number they can call. And it's just bracelets.
Brilliant.
I do that stuff all the time with the kids in my community that go to my church, and we do it, and we do it for fun, but also like, put your name on there, put your number on there, and it's
Yeah.
it's like a way to also say, well, you have this resource, and talk to the parents about it and use it for this reason.
Yeah.
And it's like cute, and they're not going to be, if they're separated for any reason, I don't think the first thing that's going to happen is that somebody's going to take away their bracelets.
Anna, how did your experience with ICE affect you?
As a result of living under this type of pressure, we were trained to grow up very quickly. Like before I was 10, I already had like a plan for, how we would just make it work through our networks, and, because we really wanted to stay here and we really wanted to study here, and our life was here. We were both, and I don't want to speak for my sister, but I know for myself, I think we got used to like functioning at a level of anxiety that's like not very healthy. So by the time that I turned 27, I was like already developing things like psoriasis, like when you're really stressed that you get blood vessels in your
Right.
eyes and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
have one of those. That's like really young for things like that to happen.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that physically happened to me, I was feeling all of my stress like in my stomach. And so I wasn't able to hold down any like food really. I started developing allergies to like meats, certain types of dyes in food. And I was relatively a healthy young person. My entire diet changed. And by the time I was in my mid 20s, my PCP had to have a very serious conversation with me about like my stress levels, my hormone levels, because it was really like, if you ever want to carry a child, if you want to be a mom, like your reproductive health is actually really affected by your stress because you're not even getting your period. I think a lot about the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
What is The Body Keeps a Score, and why is it relevant?
It's a book that goes through how trauma that you've experienced follows you through your entire life and can be connected to illnesses. It wasn't until my doctor spoke to me in that way, it started clicking for me, the effects of just having experienced that one time, but then also living through the trauma of consistently not knowing what was coming next as I was younger was
Right.
really affecting my day to day. As an adult, I really hadn't developed healthy survival mechanisms to just have like a healthy, balanced nervous system.
And now we are going to pause for a message from our sponsor. Today's episode of Little Feet Community is brought to you by the letter C for the Crow's Nest. This curated lifestyle boutique showcases a selection of items sourced from artisans nationally and internationally. This store is located in Red Hook, New York, and offers high-quality merchandise at all price points. Female-owned, the Crow's Nest features multiple home goods and gifts, from handcrafted jewelry to hip and fun items like coupe glasses for home mixologists, elegant accent pieces, and much more. To learn more, visit them at crowsnesthudsonvalley.com or call them at 845-835-6299. And we are back to Little Feet Community with our guests Yesenia Arias and Ana Victoria Morales.
I share that to say that even with all of that, I think my family's been very blessed, and we've been very, very fortunate, because once my mom was detained and we were able to get all the details as to why, I was able to go back to my employer at Elizabeth Warren's office, and the immigration personnel there connected us to a law firm, a very big law firm that was able to take my mom's case pro bono. And essentially, they found out that the US government had sent my mom a notice to report to immigration court, and it was never delivered. So they were able to get proof of this.
Yeah.
And with that, we were able to reopen my mom's case, go to immigration court, and then get her papers. And through that process, she didn't have to return to the Dominican Republic because of a ton of advocacy that we
Yeah.
did to make sure that we were able to sustain that and keep that here. But she just became a naturalized citizen a year and a half ago.
Oh my God.
And my biggest thing for her is like when she's out, like, do you have your passport on hand?
Right.
And now she laughs at me like, it's not a big deal. I was like, you think it's not a big deal, but we're naturalized citizens and you never know.
Yeah.
But I always, and I know Patty, you and I spoke about this, and let me know when I should pause. But I think with my personal story, I oftentimes do feel like the outlier. And I oftentimes do feel like somebody that's been so fortunate that had all of the right supports and almost like, I want to say, quote unquote, the right background, right? Like, I don't know. And I know so many people, like I literally like lose sleep over the fact that so many people and so many men, brothers, uncles, dads were picked up by ICE a few weeks ago and sent to
Yeah.
a completely different country and displaced, like completely displaced and placed in what looks like a concentration camp. And if you
Mm.
turn on the news, it's being celebrated. It breaks my heart. I can't even believe that we're living in these times and that this system is allowing it to happen. So that's why I was grateful when you reached out, because if there's anything in our story that we can share to shed light to this, we want to, but also that like we're not that far removed from something like that
Yeah.
happening to us. So
Yeah. Anna, thank you so much for sharing your
of course.
story. And I think one of the things, and Yesenia, I imagine you'll agree, one of the things I'd like to talk about, maybe the three of us, is, you spoke so beautifully to the toll of the stress.
Mhm.
And if we can offer parents just some guidance, some advice about how, ideas for how they can mitigate some of that stress, I'd be curious to know, Anna, did the adults in your life see that you were undergoing those symptoms of stress, and if so, I mean, what can parents do?
Yeah. I don't know that the adults around me saw it because I think that because we come from an immigrant community, this is the norm for a lot of
Mm.
people.
Oh,
And so it wasn't until I was in spaces that were white or spaces where people had access to more education or access to more resources that I could tell the difference in my nervous system to my peers.
oh
Like,
my gosh, that is so
why aren't you?
heartbreaking.
Yeah, and like I remember like being in college. Wait, why aren't you that stressed about that paper? Like, I don't get
Wow.
it. When I went to college, I did a triple major. And I did a triple major because it was the first time in my life that I didn't have to have a second job and go to school. So I didn't understand it. The concept of a liberal arts education in that way didn't make sense to me. Like, it felt like a waste of time to just go to school full time and that's all I had to do.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it, if I knew what I know now about life, I think maybe I would have just done one major. Like I had
Yeah.
all of these plans for things that might not have worked out. And really, I should have just tried to enjoy it more.
Yeah.
And so I think for parents right now, the biggest thing I think I would share, and now that I am a mom of a daughter that's like very awake and very astute, is for parents to try and be present, right? Like, we were lucky because we got to go to church. You know, the idea of meditation wasn't something that was a practice that we did, but the idea of praying was.
Mm.
And I think even though I didn't have that set space to connect with myself, with my core. At church, I felt like I was connecting to the divine and to something greater than me,
Right.
and that helped me a lot. And
Okay.
now, as an adult and somebody that has kind of come to terms with some of it. I mean, I'm still working through a lot of it. Um, I think sometimes I just breathe, right? Make it a
Yeah.
point to go outside, make it a point not to be on my phone, being present with my daughter, being present with my family. I think we're all just learning how to live now. I'll share this. In my current role, I work with a lot of young people that have been incarcerated and with young people that have legal backgrounds. And my role with them is to work in advocacy and organizing and policy and systems change. And I was in a room with young people out in Chelsea, Massachusetts. It's a immigrant community. Many people whose parents either they themselves do not have documents or they are not all the things.
Yeah.
And it was nice to be like in community with these young people. And as like they're processing all the things that are happening, one of them shares, you know what? If something does happen to us, at least we know English and at least we know how to navigate the systems. And I think we'll be okay. These are like 14 and 15-year-olds. Part of me wants to like celebrate that. But then
Yeah.
the other part of me is sad because they have worked through making sure that regardless, they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And how many 14-year-olds have to even think about that?
mhm,
It's
mhm,
just,
yeah.
Yesenia, what do you think about that?
You were saying something about resilience right earlier
Yeah.
within the community. And I feel like that sense of resilience could almost be like a double-edged sword, right? Because it almost like puts a lot of pressure on folks of immigrant background to like just pick yourself up and keep going.
Mm.
And that can be really helpful, but it can also be really hurtful because then like the adults, kind of like you were describing, don't really catch on like the kids are struggling and they need support because they're so focused on like, I gotta keep moving. I think the reality is right now, the climate that we're in, like I don't know that anyone necessarily feels safe right now.
Mhm,
And we're all kind of reacting and trying to find ways to kind of move forward. But I think the one thing I would say about what parents can do is like, other than, like you were saying, like show up, is really be very encouraging about talking about things going on, about their emotions, about things going on. Even if that emotion is fear and you don't have a response to that. I think that's the thing that we all like, even as adults, we struggle with like naming, like, hey, I'm scared right now, right? Because we almost want that, like, I'm supposed to know what's going to happen, but none of
mhm,
us do. And I think sometimes even just opening up that opportunity to talk and name that emotion, whether it's fear or sadness,
Yep.
it's just like a space to kind of put it out there and not let it like get bottled up as it tends to.
Mm.
mhm. No, I agree. I think also telling kids, I think that our parents really make a mistake when we underestimate the ability for children to understand any type of circumstance. So I think that when parents have the ability to share their vulnerabilities and to share that they're scared and to share, that maybe they don't have all the answers, I think that also allows kids to process things more. I think what is more dangerous is when we're just functioning at a level of anxiety that is not healthy, and really we end up internalizing it. At least in my experience, that's what I did.
Yeah. And Yesenia, I imagine you see that a lot in your counseling work.
Yeah. The generational trauma or like just being afraid and not talking about it.
Yeah,
Both
both and
things
all.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this isn't isolated to the immigrant community for sure, but it definitely is a thread, a common thread that I see across like not just like the Latino community, but other folks from other immigrant identities. And yeah, this is just like it's so interesting to see how we tend to fall into the patterns that our families played out before us. And I mean, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You kind of repeat what you saw growing up in some ways.
Right.
I mainly encourage people to just acknowledge and voice as a first step. And sometimes it's not even like, I mean, obviously, I'm an advocate for mental health, being a therapist myself, but sometimes it's not even like that's the next necessary step, although it tends to be one of the most appropriate like sources of space to kind of start talking about this stuff. But even like as a parent, right? Like, in what ways can you start modeling that to your
Right.
children? In what ways can you start encouraging that, like communication from your kids? Even if it feels a little foreign, it might be good practice for you too, right? Like just to kind of like fumble your way through it. I don't think anyone is perfect at it. Like I'm supposed to be a quote unquote professional at this, and I fumble my way through it too. But that's part of the idea behind it. It's like finding ways to just even like try to talk
Mhm.
about this stuff.
Yeah. And I also think that language is extremely powerful. Right now, it feels like it's easy for external voices to say, oh, but they're criminals. Oh, but they're all illegals. The minute we're using language that makes somebody othered, it completely dehumanizes the issue. And so then when you think about what that does to kids,
Yeah.
that's even deeper because they're hearing that because they are Latino or whatever background there are and they're being targeted, that they're less than and that they are not human. And there's no spaces for kids to think this through, but they are listening to that. And when you turn on the news, if people are listening to the news, that's what you're getting. Those are the messages that you're getting. And so, like, another thing I would say is, like, don't listen to the news. And I know that sounds insane, but
Yeah.
every single time I turn on the news, I have like a sense of paralysis where I'm like, wow, this is really happening. And this is the way we're talking about humans. And I think that that internalization of like language and the lack of support for young minds and kids really affects generations. And I think society underestimates our children's brains. When I think about my younger self and like my inner child, I wish I had an adult in my life that told me, like, it's okay to be a kid. Like, it's
Mm.
okay to want to play outside. It's okay to want to focus on the arts. It's okay to sit down and just read the series of unfortunate events because that's what you want to do instead of like having to figure out, if you're going to go help your mom clean a house or if you're going to go help mom, at the laundromat where she's working because you need to make sure that there's like enough money or all the things. And I just wish that I would have, as a kid, have had that support because I think that if I was more tapped to that innocence, I would have been able to bring some of that into my teenage years and my adulthood.
Mm. Yeah, because for a child, that is all of those things that you mentioned are the things that are
Mhm.
self-care essentially, right?
Yeah.
So that they help you relax and calm down and have time to think and so not to have had that routine and that practice as a child that's going to have
Mhm.
long-term impacts.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh,
And you lose it, and then you have to like learn it and train yourself.
yeah.
Um, So if we could create moments of joy for children and moments of shared culture, being in community, I think that can make all the difference because sometimes parents don't know what to do. But if you can even if you're in fear, if you can be intentional about sharing space with your children and still celebrating life with them, I think that's important.
So a young friend of mine shared recently that they were not, similar to your story, Anna, that they were not made aware of their status until rather recently. So I was just wondering if you could offer some advice to parents about how to open that conversation. Like, do you recommend that maybe they go back through the story of their family and then just loop that in somehow? I don't know. Like, how would you even begin to share that?
Hmm. I mean, I think from my own experience now, I always question like why? Like why would we have done that? Like why did we leave in the first place? Like what was the point? And I know and I say it from a place of curiosity and also a lot of privilege because I'm here and I've been able to build a beautiful home, a beautiful family, and a beautiful career. And still, I think to myself, but why did my parents choose to leave? So I think that whatever that answer is for parents, and I know my parents have tried to explain it to me, and in my head it still doesn't make any sense because I was also 6. Nobody asked me. It was like
Yeah.
it just happened, and that was hard. Like one day I was in paradise, the next day I was in a place where like the leaves fell from the trees and like it
That's
snowed. What is
oh.
that? I can't even like walk barefoot outside. No. And so I share that because I feel like there should have been a point where like my parents shared with me even at that age, like why, the reasons why they were doing it, what in their mind made sense to them, what were their hopes for our family. Because I think that as people, especially if this is a young person that's just learning that they're undocumented, if they're able to identify with their parents as a young person themselves and as somebody that's just trying to figure it out, it makes the world of a difference. Like
Mm.
when my parents decided to immigrate, they were in their late 20s. And I think about when I was in my late 20s. I mean, I didn't have a kid then, but there's no way I would have left my entire world
Mm.
to give my children a better life. But my parents did that for me, right?
Mm.
And that was their hopes for us. And that's why, like, my sister is now a nurse and is traveling the world, and I'm doing a type of work that I like, and all the things. But it came at a price, at a very big price. And the American dream that they were hoping for really destroyed our family and tore us apart. And we're currently rebuilding what that means for us. And so I think for this person, it's heavy work, but it's really willing to ask their parents why and what their hopes were. And then maybe they can own some of that themselves so that they can maybe feel at peace. Because it wasn't until I started owning my own story and my own why that I like started to make peace with it.
Am I correct in thinking that, like, when children are very young, is there a fear that if you're really candid with the children about pieces like that, that they may say it to someone who won't necessarily be friendly with that information? You know, it's got to be really difficult making that decision about, you know, what and when to tell your children.
Yeah, I think you bring up a valid point. It's tough, right? Like I think you're trying to balance like starting to give your kids a sense of identity. Because really that's what it comes down to. Like I think that it's so essential for parents to just start those conversations in the best using the words that they want to use.
Mm.
Like they can control the narrative in that way. Because otherwise, kids are going to hear it from their friends, kids are going to hear it from TV, and it's probably not going to be the story that they want their kids to kind of like have, right? Like, who wants their kid to think that ICE is this like evil thing that is out to get them, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, that's not an untrue story, but it's also like not fully the scope of their what their life could look like, right? And so that's where parents really have a lot of power to start those conversations ahead of that happening, so or to manage what that like narrative is that the kid has about who they are in this country right now, right? Because then it starts to kind of tap into that sense of belonging or not, which we don't want to happen, right? Because
Right.
any child here who's getting an education belongs here, and so like we don't want kids to feel like they are unsafe or don't belong, right? And so that's where you really want to ensure you're kind of navigating how they're thinking about themselves in this world too.
Yeah. Anna and Yesenia, thank you for creating this episode. The advice you offered today will help so many families as they seek to preserve the well-being of their children, you know, through these traumatic circumstances. So thank you. It was really a gift that you gave us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Little Feet Community Podcast. I'm Patty O'Connor, a retired preschool teacher and your host. A special thanks to our producer, Miranda Schaefer, and associate producer, Tara Schaefer. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. And please check out our Instagram account. You can also learn more about Little Feet Community on our website, www.littlefeetcommunity.com. and at our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/@Little Feet Community. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to play.